Greenlight Network presents Football Time.
Hey, and welcome to the Football Time Show. We're here for the Week 9 recap.
We're the best, we're the beautiful, we're the only Ghostbusters.
And after an off week, we're back to get fully into the action with Achilles Rain, who's had an off weekend. It was a tough weekend for our favorites of the Favorite Taking podcast. So, Achilles, are you ready to get into a tough Week 9 for you?
Yeah, I'm kind of glad that last week didn't happen for us because it didn't go too well for me and a lot of the favorites in the NFL. But we'll talk about that in a little bit, so let's get into it.
All right, let's start out on Thursday night. The Indianapolis Colts coming off a bit of a disastrous turn in the Titans game. Carson Wentz went full Carson Wentz, and then he went full Carson Wentz again by looking good, of course, in this game. Leave it to the Jets to make him look really, really good. But overall, the Colts sort of bounced back off that tough win. I don't know if the division will be in order here, but they sort of kept themselves alive here for a playoff spot. What'd you make of this game here?
I mean, I don't think there's really too much to take away from this game other than the fact that it probably was a little more impressive on the side of the New York Jets, just, with the injuries they had to deal with and, the effort and type of play that some of the guys that played the backup position to the backup, they came out and looked pretty good. So I thought that it was kind of an impressive game for the Jets. And, for the Colts, I think a lot of us expected them to, kind of right the ship a little bit during this game and get things back on track, which they did, putting up a lot of points also.
Yeah, definitely so. And Jonathan Taylor continued to look good. 19 carries, 172 yards in this game. And really what I think was lost in that Titans game, on that Sunday before that was, they were milking Jonathan Taylor early. They went away from him late in that game when he was still gashing them, and they tried to go full Wentz, and Wentz just sort of caught him there. And it was a much more controlled Indianapolis Colts team here. 19 carries for Taylor, 172 yards, 30 passes for Wentz, 22 of 30. So much more efficient offensively. Now, you grade that a little bit on a curve with the Jets coming in on a short week, but they've shown the ability to at least beat these bad teams so far this season. So I think that does help them out. Mike White got knocked out early in this one. The crafty veteran, Josh Johnson out of San Diego, came in. I don't know how many teams this guy has been a backup quarterback for, but it's getting close to every team in the league, but came in, I thought played pretty well. The thing I'd worry about most Colts-wise here, if you're looking at it that way, is defensively. They continue to struggle. They got up 14-0 in that Tennessee game. Could not hold that lead. Got up big in this game and sort of let the Jets creep back in. That defense just doesn't seem to really have its mojo from last season back yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something to be concerned about, but, we have seen them at least at some points during this season play some pretty solid defense. Maybe not to the level they played last season, but good enough to win them some games. And that offense seems to really kind of gotten in rhythm. As you mentioned, they did lose that Titan game, but the offense wasn't really the biggest issue in that game until very late when Carson Wentz had made a couple mistakes. They've been playing really well. So I think there's a lot of positives to take from the way they've been playing as of late. Definitely some things to be concerned about, but I think overall, pretty good looking win, pretty good performance, and hopefully they can keep this going.
Yeah, definitely so. So we'll move on to our next game, and this was officially the most Vikings game of Vikings games. Pretty much overall in the history of this Vikings team under Kirk Cousins. Dominated early, let the Ravens back in, and then had plenty of chances in overtime to go down and score. Even on an interception by Lamar Jackson that put him on the 40-yard line, could not score. Ravens eventually went down, got the field goal here. this Vikings team continues to baffle the mind. But what do you take from this game? Ravens win a close one here. It's really 2 weeks in a row that they've looked bad with sandwiched between that bye week. They had that bad loss to Cincinnati. You thought maybe it's an aberration coming off the bye. They come back, look better versus the Vikings. They didn't look great. They did get the win. What'd you make of this game here? 34-31 Baltimore here.
Real tough game for the Ravens and Raven fans to sit there. I'm sure it was a real nail-biter there. Especially early on, it looked like this was going to be one of those upsets. I told you as we were kind of hanging out watching games that this was upset Sunday, and it seemed like a couple of teams, managed to pull off the win when they were supposed to win, this being one of them. But I think this really solidified, at least for me, the fact that the Vikings are not a good team, but they're a very dangerous team, a team you don't want to face off or overlook, because in this particular game, Cousins had a pretty bad game. His numbers look mediocre at best, but that running attack, still looked really good. And we know they have really good weapons on the outside, so they can always make some plays. Kirk Cousins can have a really good day, and he's shown it a few times this season. That defense is hot or cold, mostly cold, but when they get hot and everything kind of gets going, they could be a dangerous team. So probably not somebody you want to face off in the playoffs, or if you're in contention for a playoff spot, not a team you want to overlook.
Yeah, definitely so. I must say, just little weird that the Vikings only gave Cook 17 carries. He had such a good game. Now, I know a lot of that came on that 66-yard run, but I saw holes all over the place. They did try to, I guess, sort of keep Cousins in check, 17-28, but I thought they could have really handed the rock a lot more to Dalvin Cook here, especially when they got up in this game. But overall, they couldn't control Lamar Jackson. 27-41, 266, 3 touchdowns, 21 carries, 120 yards. Now, I'm not sure that's quite the usage rate, as we steal a basketball term, that the Ravens probably want in a Week 9 game that they want Lamar using right there. But I think they felt they needed this win, so they pushed the we're going to use Lamar as much as we can to try to win this game, especially seeing how important it is if you look at the Bills, who have just I don't even know. We'll get into that game. We're going to have a lot to talk about these last 2 weeks about what the Bills offense has become. But, they're sitting there with the Chiefs struggling, the Raiders in, they're just in a total mess. The Chargers struggling. You got the Titans, who did get the win this week, but they're without Derrick Henry. So that 1 seed, now that Cincinnati is struggling, is right in their hope. So I think they pushed, really, really hard to, sort of steal this game and make sure they got it. But overall, that's a lot of usage for Lamar Jackson in a Week 9 game there.
Yeah, definitely. But I will say this. If I'm a Ravens fan, I feel a little more confident knowing that the team is willing to, unleash the beast, so to speak, if it comes down to, where they have to. Obviously, you don't want to see Lamar, run the ball that many times. The more times he touches the ball in a run situation, the higher the risk of him getting hurt. And you need a healthy Lamar if you're going to go far in the playoffs. So, but like I said, I still think that if I'm a Ravens fan, it makes me feel good to know, like, hey, that's something we can keep in our back pocket. And if things aren't going our way, it's something we could use.
Last thing on the Ravens. Are they your favorite to get that 1 seed now? Are you still thinking Bills? Are you thinking Titans? Are you thinking Chiefs now that they seem to be getting every break possible? Where is your head out here in that AFC that seems a bit jumbled up here as to who will get that 1 seed? Because I think the 1 seed is really, really important in the AFC. I don't think it's as important in the NFC, because I think that top level, those top level teams could all probably win on the road and at home. I don't even know if some of them have all that much of a home field advantage. But Baltimore, Buffalo, Tennessee, Kansas City. Those are big time home field advantages, and if you can get a bye and home field throughout, I think that really really boosts your playoffs hopes here. So who's your favorite right now to be the AFC 1 seed?
Well, to be completely honest with you, at the beginning of the season, I thought that by this point in the season, not 100% certainty, who the favorite would be, but I thought I would have at least some idea. As the season has progressed, I've actually felt more and more confused. I want to say the Ravens simply because of the position that they currently sit at, but they've had a couple close matches and even against some pretty bad teams. So it's hard for me to really give them, 100% assurance that these guys are going to go all the way and win, the AFC title. But I don't know. It's really up in the air. The Titans definitely, are playing a lot better. The defense seems to have really stepped their game up as of late. That offense can be very dangerous, as we all know. The Chiefs, they're playing horrible, and I don't think that there's a way that they could possibly win out, but it's still the Chiefs, so you can't count them out.
If a COVID gets quarterback every week, they might be able to.
Yeah. Listen, I think that it's getting really bunched up there at the top. I think that all these teams are really vying to be that top dog in the AFC. And it's going to be a tight race. I'm actually getting more excited about the AFC race. Not something I could have said early on in the season, but it seems to have gotten really tight and really competitive. And like I said about the Vikings, it's also true for a lot of teams in the AFC. You can lose to just about any team. It doesn't matter how bad or how good they tend to be. It's gotten really competitive, and I like it.
Yeah, definitely so. All right, let's flip to the Vikings. 3-5 now. 2 bad losses in a row. Are we still thinking the Vikings can maybe, with a push here, get to a playoff spot, or have you sort of written them off? I think, that bottom part of the NFC, I think 9-8 probably could get that last playoff spot. So the Vikings at 3-5, overall talent-wise, it looks like they have the best talent. So are you crossing the Vikings off, or are you still giving them a little bit of a puncher's chance here?
I'm not going to cross the Vikings off. Like I said, at any given time, they can really turn it on, both on offense and defense, and they have a really solid running attack. So I'm not going to count them out just yet. There's still hope, obviously, especially the way things are going. And, in this day and age of COVID, you just never know. So I'm not going to count them out. And I don't think they're one of the top contenders, but I do think that they're a very dangerous team that probably nobody wants to face.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm quite ready to cross them off, but they seem like losers no matter what. I thought they had this game, and we were going to be talking about Baltimore as, what sort of losing streak are they in? And instead, they blow this lead. They were just awful the week before. So it's just, I'm not quite ready to cross them off. If you have Dalvin Cook, you have Adam Thielen, you have Jordan Jefferson, they're loaded with talent, but it just doesn't seem like they want to win football games. They have a very nice fantasy team, I will say, but that doesn't always equate to wins, as we've seen. But we'll move on, and if I want to steal another line from Ghostbusters, this next one, it is alive. The Patriots, 24-6 over the Carolina Panthers. Sam Darnold, I think we found out he is not the answer at quarterback. He was... I don't think atrocious is even enough to say here. I watched a lot of this game because I was curious about this one, and he missed a ton of throws. The Patriots' offense was nothing, and they were really, really scaled back. They basically just waited on Sam Darnold to mess things up, and then they capitalized on that. The Patriots now 5-4. I don't know if I put them in that group we talked about earlier, but I think you have to start talking about them as maybe that tier below in the AFC, as porous as a lot of these teams in the AFC have played the last couple weeks. So let's start with the Patriots. What did you make of them this week?
The Patriots are a funny team because to me, when I look at them, I see them almost at the same level as the Vikings, for example. They're the counterpart of the Vikings in the AFC, except that they don't have the weapons on offense. They're making it work somehow. Obviously, some of that has to be attributed to the coaching staff. But I think we also have to give a little credit here to the young rookie. I think he's really done a good job at taking the reins and making this his team. And you see a progression, although it may not, be like completely amazing and eye-opening, there's definitely been a progression week to week to week. Even when he makes mistakes, he seems to kind of just shake them off and keep moving. So there's a lot of good things going on in New England. I don't think, as you said, that they're quite at that playoff caliber level where we can lock them into a playoff spot. But I do think that they're better than we thought they were going to be, and they seem to be improving. So there's definitely a lot of good things to look at in New England. If you're a Patriots fan, I'm sure you're probably at least somewhat excited that you have a shot, although be it a little bit of a long shot. But I think they're improving, and I think that all signs point to them being good at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yeah. I think the defense is definitely improving. Now, how much of that is, who they've played recently and how much of that is, them improving. I do think they are improving. They've looked much better on the defensive side of the ball. Offense still a little bit hot and cold, but, Mac Jones, was efficient, yet not spectacular, but I think that's probably what he's going to be all year. They're definitely back in their fun running back fantasy mode where Ramondre Stevenson, 10 carries, Harris, 15 carries, Brandon Bolden, 8 carries. That's always fun. The Patriot running back, 10 carry, 5-player backfield. Annoying, but effective. All of them had pretty good, yards per carry there other than Harris, but he got the touchdown here, and he's the best one in the group. So I don't know if the offense is quite there to win playoff games, but I do think this team is starting to knock on the door right there. Big game with Cleveland coming up. I think that'll be, a game that will probably help decide one of those last couple of playoff spots. They still got 2 games with Buffalo there. We haven't gotten into Buffalo yet, but, with 2 games against them in division, it's not out of the question. Do you put them quite on that level as Buffalo? Or, do we think Buffalo sort of finds themselves and the Patriots aren't quite on that level yet?
It's hard for me to really look at Buffalo and think that they've somehow become lesser of a team over the last couple of weeks. This is a team that played outstanding last season and could have had a really deep run. And then even this season, they started off slow in that first game where they lost to Pittsburgh, I believe. And then they just completely went on a string of complete blowouts where they were just dominating teams. And I'm not talking about, a 7-point win, a 10-point. I'm talking about dominating teams, putting up 40 burgers, and it's hard for me to think that,
20-point spread that I took. That's pretty much all you need to say.
Yeah, exactly. So it's hard for me to really be like, okay, listen, it's 2 weeks of, of poor, and it wasn't really 2 weeks of poor offense because they played a pretty decent game against Tennessee. Tennessee just, like I said earlier, they've just been playing a lot better on defense, and they have really good offense. So that, it could happen to anybody. This week, we'll get into it obviously in a little bit, but Buffalo to me is still on a different level. And I think that if I had to, choose like who the top dogs are right now, I think that I would probably have to lean towards Buffalo. So I don't think they're quite at that level yet. I think New England has ways to go before they can get there. But like I said, the rookie's playing pretty well. He's learning from his mistakes. He's got a great coaching staff to learn from. So, they're not elite yet, and they're not quite a playoff caliber team yet, but I think that they're definitely knocking on the door of at least, showing some teeth and being like, hey, we're here to play.
Yeah. Remember a couple weeks ago when I said I'm becoming a Vikings fan? We're crossing that off. I'm no longer a Vikings fan. I think I'm starting to like this Patriots team a little bit. Now, as soon as I said that, the Vikings went in the tank and played terrible for 2 weeks. So I don't know if I just put the kibosh on the Patriots here, but certainly I think I put the kibosh on the Panthers, liking them so much early. The nice treat you got from Sam Darnold the first 4 weeks of the season has turned into a very, very disturbing trick. Jason Michael Myers style, trick here. There's no way they can play him again next week. Is there? Or you just ride this till you die, till the end of the season, or you at least try to salvage this and see what PJ Walker has? I'm curious on your thoughts on that.
Obviously, I know that it's hard to really rate Darnold's performance back in New York because he didn't really have a lot of weapons to work with on offense. And he made a lot of mistakes, but you kind of attribute that to growing pains for a young quarterback. You expected a lot better. Well, maybe some people expected a lot better when he came to Carolina. Some people expected a lot of the same. And those people were turned into doubters early on in the season when he was playing pretty well. Then McCaffrey got hurt and a lot more was put on his plate. And it seemed like he started to sort of collapse under the pressure, all the expectations. Now you have a game against a winnable Patriots team. I'm not going to say it was, easy game, but against a winnable Patriots team. And you have the return of your star player in McCaffrey. And this is the type of performance you put out there. I think that you can't play him going forward. I think you got to see what else you can get out of the rest of the guys on that team. And you have to at least get something out of, McCaffrey here, because that's really your ticket seller. And if you can't get wins for him, who's to say what the future holds? I think that they can't really play Darnold. He's just played too bad over the last several weeks now at this point. So as much as it pains me to say, because I know he's young and he can still turn it around, I think for the rest of the season, you probably have to see what else you got.
Yeah, definitely so. Once again, the Panthers defense played really, really well. You look at the stats of this game. Patriots ran 59 plays. Panthers ran 57 plays. Offensive yards, 273. They held the Patriots to 273 total yards on offense. The Carolina Panthers had 240. So, it's not the Panthers defense. The Panthers defense is keeping you in games to win them. And if your quarterback makes a couple plays, much like I think if we said Mac Jones was on the Carolina Panthers here, I think it'd be Carolina that's 5-4, 6-3, and you put Sam Darnold on the Patriots, and they're probably 3-6, 4-5. So it's just really glaring. I don't know if PJ Walker is, really that much better. I was always a fan at Temple, but he was a really good college quarterback. I don't know if he's a really good NFL quarterback, but I just think you lose your team if you keep throwing Darnold out there. You've already seen it a little bit with Robbie Anderson. Now, Robbie's always been a little bit temperamental, considering, 5 of his probably 7 years in the league, he's had to play with Sam Darnold. That might make anybody a little temperamental. I think you just got to throw PJ in there, see if it gets better. If it doesn't, you can always just go back to, Sam Darnold. It's probably a lost season anyway. And then you see what you can do in the draft or, free agency in the upcoming year. I don't think you can go forward with Sam Darnold at your quarterback. Just see what you can do. And, then you cross it off and you just go lost season. Our defense is there. It should be there for another 2 or 3 years, and see if you can fix the offense and find a quarterback there.
Definitely so.
All right. The Cincinnati Bengals. We talked about how great they are. Somehow they managed to blow an 11-point lead the week before to the Jets with about 5 minutes to go. You write that off as a bump, losing focus after a big win versus Baltimore. Then they have this game versus the Cleveland Browns, and they just looked bad. bad. Like the kind of teams we thought the Bengals would be at the start of the season. Line looks rough. Joe Burrow got sacked 5 times. Baker wasn't great, but he did his sort of Mac Jonesy thing. Nick Chubb, 14 carries, 137 yards. Might want to milk that a little bit more, but probably a sort of season-saving win for the Browns because they were heading down a dark slope there. Get this win over the Bengals. Let's start Bengals side of things here. We were really, really big on them, and these last 2 weeks, it seems like they've regressed back to sort of what we thought at the beginning of the year here.
Yeah, listen, I'm not going to say that we're pioneers or trailblazers, so to speak, but we were kind of talking the Bengals up a little bit, and it was a few weeks ago we kept talking about. We were talking about, could this team be for real? We saw a lot of good things on defense, and the offensive, they're really clicking on offense. Young wide receiver, young quarterback. They already had good chemistry, so there was a nice connection there, and they were playing really well even against tough teams. And we started asking ourselves that question: are these guys for real? We didn't quite want to believe it because we hadn't seen enough of it, but we start to become believers more and more and more. Next thing I know, I turn to national sports media, and all I hear about is the Bengals. And the Bengals the Bengals are great, the Bengals are going to do this. And what happens? They lose to the Jets. And they're like, okay, you can mark that one off. No big deal. They're a young team. They got to learn. Then they come out against a pretty much banged up Browns team, and they disappeared. They were nowhere to be found. This
game
defense
was one of those that went over in the first quarter.
Yeah, and now mind you, this Sunday was very weird. This was Upset Sunday, as I call it. There was a lot of situations where teams that we thought could win this game, they just couldn't pull it off. And this was one of those teams. I thought defensively they'd be able to do enough against this banged up Browns team that they'd be competitive. And offensively, I thought that they were good enough on offense to at least be able to keep up, even if the defense didn't play well. And that wasn't even the case. They played horrible on defense. They played horrible on offense. Joe Burrow was making a lot of mistakes. It seemed like the bright lights of a divisional game, when it actually mattered, really got to his head. And we're playing mind games with him because he just wasn't himself. Now, going forward, do I think that they can turn it around and kind of start playing better football? I think they can. I think we've seen enough of it from that first half of the season to at least warrant them, a couple of bad games and still think they can play well. But it does go to show you that just because the team's hot, it's not about how you start. It's not about, how you're doing midway through the season. It's about how you finish. Obviously, your final record is very important, but teams that finish strong, even teams that don't win their divisions or don't, necessarily make it with the bye week, teams that go into the playoffs hot are usually the ones that we see holding up that trophy. So probably a lot of things to be concerned about, but also a lot of just whatever. Let's move on. And I'm pretty sure this team's going to be fine. They're young. They'll learn from this.
Yeah. The defense, I think, is the shock. They were about a top 6, defense by Football Outsiders. And then the last 2 weeks, they've dropped all the way down to 18 by these last 2 games. I don't quite know what's happened there. Maybe they threw too much in that Ravens game. It took too much out of them, and they just haven't been able to sort of get right, since then. That Jets meltdown was just, they were up 11 with about 5-6 minutes to go. I had already flipped it off and, moved on, and then I went and saw the score in that game, and I was like, whoa, what happened here? And then this week, I just wanted to stay away from the game overall because I didn't know what was coming out of Cincinnati's side. Cleveland has been so bad the last, 4 weeks or so. Yes, they've been banged up, but even with that, they haven't looked all that good on defense or offensive side of the ball. I don't think offensive they looked a ton better. They looked much better on defense. At least they were flying around. I don't know how much of that is, the Cincinnati offensive line, which seems to have become a problem once again, where it was, sort of holding up okay in those first couple weeks. It seems in that Jets game, they were getting to them a lot. They got to them a lot this week. So I don't know where this Cincinnati, if this defense can find its way back, I think that puts them in the mix. But if they can't, I think they're going to end up, probably 6 wins or so on this season. So, they got to find that defense again, because I don't know if this team is capable of sort of playing from behind, really, with that offensive line where teams know they have to pass. They had to throw 40 times in this game, only 13 carries to Joe Mixon, 5 to P. Ryan. That's not how they were doing it earlier. They had a much, much better balance than before. So it'll be interesting to see if these Bengals team can find their defense and sort of get themselves back on track. Flip things to the Browns. They got this win back to 5-4. So they're tied with the Bengals, tied with the Patriots. A little behind the Raiders and Chargers, but I think there's probably not a lot of drop off between that level of teams. So what do you make of this win for the Browns? Do you see them going forward and winning some more games, or you're a little bit hot and cold and you're still seeing problems with this offense? If Nick Chubb doesn't run for 10 yards a carry, what do they really have is my question, I think, more than anything.
I think the biggest issue with this team right now is that locker room. And it'd be interesting to be a fly on the wall in that locker room, just to kind of find out what the environment is like there, what the attitudes, the energy is like, because obviously this whole thing happened with OBJ, where, he's no longer going to be there, and the team basically parted ways with him. There was issues with, him not getting the ball, people asking for the ball. Now, I understand the whole diva concept with wide receivers, and Odell Beckham is not excluded from that list. He's really talented, but he hasn't been playing like the type of player that we expect Odell Beckham to be playing like. And this team, you also have to understand the makeup of the team. This team is best suited to be a run-first team, a play-action team, with really good defense. And I think that they can do that. As you saw, Baker Mayfield's numbers weren't, eye-popping by any means, but they were exactly what you want them to be if you're a Browns fan. They were game manager-esque type of numbers, and that's what you want. You want a run-heavy team with this type of makeup. The defense needs to start playing a little bit better. In the beginning of the season, I think a lot of us had really high expectations for this team as a whole, just based off their performance last season. So, to me, I think that they still have the right type of makeup to go into these playoffs and actually win games. They just have to get there. That's going to be I think their toughest road right now. Can they get that locker room in order in time to where, or is there even an issue in that locker room? But can they get things together in time to make a run? You don't have to win your division. Just get in there. You have the type of team that causes a lot of trouble in the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely so. I think if that defense can stabilize, they can probably get into the playoffs, because I do think they can replicate, Chubb really dominated. They're a great run blocking team. So if they can keep that defense, but like you said, it's been too hot and cold. One game they will completely shut down an opponent. The next game they're getting lit up. So it's really, really hard to read the Cleveland Browns. We already mentioned it with the Patriots. Big game, Cleveland, New England coming up. That will really have, a lot of factors into who makes the playoffs in those last couple spots. I don't think Cleveland is really a challenger for the division versus Baltimore. They're already 2 games behind, and behind the Steelers. Do you think they're a challenger for that division, or you think they're just going to have to try to find a wild card spot here?
I don't think they're really a challenger, but I don't think they need to be. As I said earlier, they have the type of team, a run-first, hard-nosed defense, if they can get their team in order, of course. But that's the type of team that wins in these playoff matches. Once the weather starts to get a lot colder and you can't really fling the ball as much as you wanted to when the elements come into play. They had that build. So I don't think they need to win the division, but obviously you still have to win games. You still got to sneak in there at some point.
Yeah. All right. We're going to have you do a complete explanation on how this one played out, but the Denver Broncos essentially quit on the season and then annihilated the Cowboys. The 30-16 score does not do this game justice because it was one that was basically over by the first quarter, and meaning the Broncos had already put this thing away. What the hell happened here? It's not so much just losing, but getting trounced at home by a team who has essentially pulled the plug on their season and now sort of has to re-plug that genie back in the bottle because they're right there to fight for this division. So let's start Broncos side of things. Yeah, I will say they finally started running the ball. 21 carries to Gordon for 80 yards, 17 carries for Javonte Williams, 111 yards. I don't know what clicked in, but finally they noticed they had two really good running backs, and they didn't have to make Teddy Bridgewater do everything. But just a weird game overall.
Yeah, I go back to my whole explanation with Baker Mayfield. Not that he's not a talented guy, but I think he's best suited to be a game manager. That's the exact same thing with Teddy Bridgewater. He's in a perfect situation to just manage the game and focus on that. Let that defense do what it does, which it's not as much as we thought it was going to be. But let that defense do what it does and attack with your running attack first. And then the pass can come off of that. And I mean, I don't know if it was Von Miller leaving. I don't know if it was, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Cowboys had a bye week.
Yes, they came up.
This game was one of those games that probably perplexed me the most out of all the games in this Sunday slate of games. I have no explanation as to how this even happened. The running attack was amazing. The passing attack for the Broncos was, exactly what you'd want it to be. Not amazing, but good enough to get you to where you need to. And as you mentioned, the final score of the game does not tell you how the game went at all. This was a complete domination, and the final score doesn't know justice. I think that all props here, go to the Broncos and their preparation. Even they were facing a team that was coming off of a bye week, had been playing really good defense. And the offense, obviously, we know what the offense can do. They were getting their quarterback back. It just, I don't know. This game caught me really off guard, but I do want to take my hat off to Broncos. And, I'm sure Bronco fans were really happy after that performance.
Yeah. We got to flip things to the Cowboys here because I think those are the main talking points. Good game by the Broncos. I don't know if we think the Broncos are really contenders here. So, it's just a weird outlet. Their wins had been versus the bottom dregs of, the NFL. Basically, I think they had beaten teams who had 3 total wins all year, and then they beat a Cowboy team who had 6. So, on the road, mind you. But let's start with Dak here. He looked really bad. You mentioned he missed the week before because of a calf injury. They really sort of downplayed it after, that bye week and then missing the game and playing Cooper Rush and beating the Vikings. Do you think he's more hurt than he really is? Because he did not look good in this game, or this is just, a bad game and you cross it off. They couldn't get the running game going. Now, granted, they got way, way far behind, but, 10 carries to Elliott, 4 carries to Pollard. That's not sort of how they've been doing it all year long. Now, they did get really behind, so they probably had to abandon it a little bit. But then you look at sort of targets, and Malik Turner, leading target guy for the Cowboys at 7. Cedric Wilson, 5. CeeDee Lamb, only 2 catches for 23 yards. It's just, not a good feel on offense. So I'm wondering, how hurt do you think Dak is? Or do you think it's just one of those bad games that you mark off?
Now, I'll first start off by saying this. I know you said that, everyone's just the talking point is, good job Broncos defense. But I think it's true. I think we have to give props to the Broncos defense. They really got in Prescott's face. They troubled him and bothered him enough he was making bad throws and took the whole offense out of rhythm. With all that being said, I don't think Dak is really, I don't think it was anything more than what they told us it was, simply because you look at last week, they went up against this Minnesota team that we just talked about how dangerous they can be, both on offense and even sometimes on defense, and they beat them. So you would think that with an extra week off of preparation for the backup quarterback after his performance, they would have just said, you know what, Dak is really hurt. He's obviously the future of our team going forward. Sit him out this week against this Bronco team that's already
especially since you basically have the division locked up now.
Exactly. And you're going up against the Broncos team that, at least on paper, they've basically ended their season early. So I think if there was more to that Prescott injury, he would have sat this week out. This was the perfect situation for Rush to not only play a second game, but have an extra week of preparation for a team that basically, as I said earlier, had already called it quits. And that's not what we got. We got a Prescott, so I assumed he had to be healthy. And this Broncos team just came out and smacked him in the mouth. So I think that the props really here, even though you said it's a talking point, the props really should go to the Broncos. The Cowboys, I'm sure they'll bounce back. We've seen it all season long. They've been really competitive, and that defense has played a lot better compared to what they did last season. So I'm just counting this one as a bad game and moving on. But as far as Prescott's concerned, I'm sorry. I think he's healthy and good to go.
All right. Last one, the defense had looked better this season for the Cowboys. Any worry that this is going to start to regress back? I think we both thought there would be a little bit of Dallas regression, defensively from such a leap that they were making, and, Diggs getting one or two picks every game. That was not sustainable. But is there worry that this defense is going to totally sort of regress back to, last year's standard?
Okay, so there's definitely going to be regression. Okay. And the only reason I say that is because there is absolutely no way that a team can go from being basically top two in worst defense in the NFL the season prior to being one of the top turnover defenses in the league. It just doesn't really happen. The last time we saw a from worst to first type of Cinderella story was my Rams, which we'll get to later, by the way. But there has to be regression. But even then, the defense has at least put together the right type of scheme. They've gotten a lot of there's a bond there that they've developed, and you can see it. There's improvement. So I'm not going to say that they're going to play the rest of the season the way they've played so far this season, but there's definitely going to be some regression based off what we've seen so far this season.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. If this is just one of those weird, NFL aberrations, we look back and sort of just be like, what the hell happened there? Or it's, a little bit more to come with the Cowboys. It is very interesting that they sort of had their division locked up, so early that maybe they start to lose focus. You think about this game, out of conference game, out of division game, that's, semi-meaningless to them. And maybe that sort of comes into play since really they have basically nothing to play for until basically the playoffs, because there's no one in that division that has any chance of sort of catching them. So maybe just sort of avoiding, complacency is going to be their hardest thing for the rest of the season. All right. You thought that one was weird. Jacksonville 9, Buffalo 6. Buffalo struggled a little bit on offense last week coming out of the bye versus Miami. they struggled a lot on offense this week. I will say the defense continues to look really, really good. It's not like the Jags came out and dominated or anything. They had 218 yards of total offense, 3.8 yards per play. It wasn't exactly a grand showing of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think I deserve at least partially my money back for last week's Jacksonville Jaguars Seattle Seahawks bet, though, for them beating the Buffalo Bills. I don't know if the casino will do that for me, but I do feel it necessary that they should at least give me half, because I knew a Jags win was coming soon enough. I don't know if we have anything really to say about the Jags here, because they were so porous on offense, and really I don't think the defense really was all that great on the Jacksonville. This just seems self-inflicted wounds by Buffalo. I've noticed it the last couple weeks. They've sort of regressed back from the running game. I don't know how much of that is Singletary and Moss being bad on the ground, and how much of that is they're just trying to overthrow and hit explosive plays. But 47 passes, 9 carries by running backs, 5 carries by the quarterback here. And once again, Josh Allen, 5 carries, 50 yards. Singletary, 6 carries, 16 yards. Zach Moss, 3 carries, 6 yards. I want to get your take, and then I want to ask another question about the Buffalo Bills running backs here.
Well, I mean, listen, I understand that Jacksonville is not the best teams, and you look at their statistic performance, and it wasn't eye-opening whatsoever. But they came out and they beat the Bills. They did what a lot of people, except for Jacksonville fans, thought possible. They beat the Bills. And it's hard for me to really, put too much onto this because, listen, the Bills, they've had a little bit of a struggle over the last several weeks, okay? Ever since that Titans game, it seems like they hit a bit of a bump here. But I don't think anyone expected the Jacksonville Jaguars to come out and win. Now, I will say that if the Jacksonville Jaguars were going to win this game, this is probably the type of game it would have to be. It's a field goal type game, with very low score, which is not something that I think anyone would have expected out of the Bills. I don't really know what to say. I think that you really just have to chalk this off as upset weekend and just move on from this if you're a Bills fan, because I have no way of explaining how that happened.
Yeah. The thing I question about the Bills and the running backs here is, I don't understand. We talked about it last year, that they seemed to not have good balance, and Singletary and Moss were not getting it done. And then once again this year, they don't appear to be getting it done. I don't understand why they don't adopt more of a, Patriots or Chiefs system where you just go, okay, you suck at running back. We're going to bring in somebody else. We're going to bring in somebody else till basically you find someone to hit. We've talked about the Ravens, who have been the number 1 rush team in the league for, 10 years, and like the last 6 years, they've had a different running back lead them in carries and rushing yards. I don't understand why they just don't try to find somebody else. You've seen Devin Singletary, you've seen Zach Moss. I think it's clear they aren't getting it done. So why are we being stubborn and keeping those guys in there and not just bringing in, a different running back, someone else, and see if you can hit pay dirt here, because I don't think this balance is going to get it done. It's certainly not going to get it done in the playoffs. If they get home games in Buffalo, they aren't going to be able to throw the ball 50 times in January, unless global warming is in full effect and it's 50 degrees there. But I don't think it's going to be 50 degrees in Buffalo in January. So I just don't understand the stubbornness of sticking with Singletary and Moss when running back has shown that it's basically the easiest position to replace in the NFL. Just keep churning them until you find something that hits.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, at least in my opinion, the easiest position to fill in football. The issue becomes replacing it with something better than what you're trying to get rid of. And I think that's where the conundrum really sits. They probably, I don't know, I would have to assume that the coaching staff and the GM and everybody see something in practice that the rest of us just aren't seeing. And that's probably why they're still sticking with these guys. They think that they can turn it around. Now, we've said over the past couple seasons that if they got more production out of that running attack, this team would be unstoppable just with Josh Allen and those wide receivers and even that defense that's very suffocating. With a good running attack, there's no telling where this team could go. But again, the trick becomes finding the right type of running back to fit your system that's going to be A, productive, and B, within budget. We have to remember that these guys aren't coming cheap. A lot of these guys are going to end up having to get paid. Maybe they were just kind of waiting it out to the point where they could draft someone who's going to be a lot cheaper than keeping one of these veteran guys who just aren't getting it done. And maybe that's what's going to have to happen because obviously the trade deadline's passed. That thing's gone. You can't cut those guys now because what are you left with after that? I think you just have to ride it out this year, hope that they can become productive. But even if they do, I think at the end of the season, it's probably time to look elsewhere.
Yeah, definitely so. Last thing on this, are you concerned with Buffalo, or you think they sort of find themselves and they'll be up at the top of the AFC heap here?
Again, like I said earlier, I'm not concerned at all with Buffalo. I know that they haven't looked good, and I know they seem to have struggled. That running game seems to have slowed down a lot. But you can expect at some point for the balance on offense to at least return to more normalcy. And even this team, this offense as a whole, the amount of points that they've been putting up as of late, you look back at for several weeks in a row where they were just completely destroying teams. I think they're going to be okay. I think they're going to figure it all out, and they'll get back to winning in no time.
Yeah. All right. This next game, I apologize if anyone stared at this one, but the Houston Texans, Miami Dolphins. Dolphins win 17-9. This is possibly the worst game of football ever played in the history of mankind.
You say that every week when there's a Houston game.
Well, this one bordered very, very closely. Tua somehow broke his finger before the game and got scratched, or he broke it a week ago. I don't know. But somehow the finger got broken. We can get into him basically never being on the field. So I don't know at what point you sort of just mark that off. It does seem early, but, health is probably the most important thing. If you can't play, what use are you? This game, just really bad. 272 yards for the Texans, 262 for the Dolphins. 4 yards per play for Texans, 3.6 for the Dolphins, 5 turnovers for the Dolphins, 4 turnovers for the Texans. Tyrod came back, was really bad. Brissett played and was really bad. Do you have anything to add to this game other than the Dolphins got their second win of the season?
There's really nothing much to say. This game was a bad game, and the better team won in this particular matchup, even with the backup quarterback. I think the biggest issue here becomes the whole Tua conversation is health. As you mentioned, health is really important in the league. Sometimes it's the most important thing. I can't remember who actually said the quote, but the most important ability is availability. And that rings true, especially when you're talking about the quarterback position. Probably one of the most important positions in all of sports. And if you can't show up for your team, it's hard for them to really view you as a leader. And in turn, it doesn't help you build a strong bond that helps you overcome obstacles. So I don't know where the Dolphins go from here. As you mentioned, I know it's really early. I don't know if you move on from Tua at this particular point, especially since what's out there isn't really tempting enough for me to be like, listen, I'm going to part ways with this high, draft pick. So I don't know where they go going forward, but listen, they got the win. They live to fight another day, and hopefully they can get things together.
Yeah. All right. We'll move on off this one and go the cockroach of the NFL season, the Atlanta Falcons, who will not die. beat the Saints 27-25. Simeon played quarterback. They did use Taysom Hill a little bit here. I wonder if we're going to get a little bit more Taysom Hill, later in as, he was coming back off that really, really bad concussion a couple weeks ago. I didn't think Simeon played all that bad, but he did have the, key fumble down there after they drove down and were in and around the goal line. That probably flipped this game. Tough one for the Saints after that big win versus Tampa Bay. But I think that's sort of what the Saints have been. Sometimes they're really, really good, and then sometimes they aren't so good. They're sort of a okay team. I don't think they're below par. They're probably just a solid playoff team. Atlanta, I don't know what the hell they are. Calvin Ridley retires, and then Matt Ryan throws for, 343 yards. Cordell Patterson has become the greatest offensive weapon in the NFL after spending 8 years in the league and no one knowing what the hell to do with him. So talk me through this one here.
Again, this is another matchup that I have no clue what's going on here. And it's not so much this particular game, it's just the teams in general. The Saints, we rave about that defense because when they're on, they're on. But it's hard for me to call them a Jekyll and Hyde defense because I don't think that's the case. I just think that, as you mentioned, they're an okay team. They're not a great team. They're not a bad team. They're an okay team. Unlike the Vikings, who tend to be more feast or famine type, I think the Saints are a little more consistent. They're just not that good, but they're also not bad. And you're talking about last week team where they won against Tampa Bay, huge win for them. But now they're going up against another divisional opponent in the Falcons. And the Falcons, I don't understand. It seems like when something's supposed to go bad for them, they play good ball, and when things are supposed to look good for them,
the week before.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand. The Falcons have been doing this to us since last season. It's hard to figure this team out, and this is one of the reasons why I tend to try my best to skip Atlanta games because I just don't know what the heck they're going to bring to the table.
Are we going to just have to accept never to bet on the Falcons and then be prepared to have you come over and watch them on the noon playoff game on a Saturday and just be disturbed here because they are now 4-4. I'm almost convinced this is the team that's going to end up in the playoffs. So I don't know. Matt Ryan is great one week and then can't hold the ball versus Carolina the week after. Cordell Patterson, I don't even know how to explain it. Arthur Smith is either a genius or I don't know. I have no idea with this team. I thought they'd be worse after Calvin Ridley retired, and somehow they threw out their best offensive game of the season. I think we're just going to go into our preview and just pass on the Falcons every week and just skip because we have no idea what's coming from them. They might beat Tampa Bay, then they might be shut out by the Jets for all I know. So it's weird. I think we probably both got a pretty good hold on the Saints here. They seem to play to the level of competition. They dominated Green Bay, they dominated Tampa, they dominated New England, and then they have losses to Carolina and Atlanta and such. So I think it's just going to be one of those years. I didn't think Simeon played all that bad. I didn't notice too much of a difference from Trevor Simeon to Jameis Winston. I'm curious if you noticed much of a difference there.
Not really. I mean, they're definitely a little more ball security as far as decision-making goes, but, there's still some things to be concerned about there on offense, and there's some things that, you got to be content with. But I think overall, he played a pretty decent game. The numbers at least speak for themselves. He was able to do enough to keep him in that game, and they could have won that game. It's just the Falcons, man. Yeah. You just don't know.
All right, we'll move on to the Raiders-Giants. I didn't bet on a ton of games. I did bet on this one because, it just – you probably shouldn't enjoy profiting off a tragic event. But I just felt like the Raiders, that the last thing was one thing too many. And then you had the cornerback video that came out the other day. And then, of course, they waiver claim OBJ. So I'm a little bit out on the Raiders. I just think too much stuff is starting to pile up on this team. And I thought they'd go to New York and struggle, which they did a little bit. It wasn't exactly like the Giants were on fire on offense, 15 to 20, 110 yards and a touchdown for Daniel Jones. But I just think it's going to be tough for the Raiders to get through this season. They did build a nice little margin. They are 5-3, so if they can sort of maintain a 500 record to close out the year, maybe they can sneak in the playoffs. But I just think if there's a candidate to go in the tank, it's probably this Raiders team. I'm curious your take on this game.
We were talking about a couple of weeks ago where we weren't sure what type of Raider team we're going to get for the rest of the season, based off all the drama that they've been going through over the last couple of weeks. Now, I will say that I did have the Raiders picked in one of my parlays, but this was prior to the whole, situation that happened. As you mentioned, maybe this was just one issue too many for them, and it finally kind of, the wheel finally gave in and the car stopped. And it looks like it's what happened. Now, I don't know if going forward they're going to, right the ship and fix things, but it's hard for me to believe that a team can gain momentum after losing momentum so many different times with so many different situations. You're talking about player drama, coach drama, and who knows what else is going on inside that locker room. So I think it's been a tough year for Raiders, and you have a good shot at possibly even sneaking into the playoffs. But even if they do, I don't think this current Raider team, as it's built right now, with all the issues they're going through, can make any noise. So this was probably the last time that I'm hopping on that bandwagon.
Yeah. Flip things to the Giants. They did win, but I wasn't overly impressed. I don't foresee this as a jumping off point where they go on a massive win streak. I think the next time they play a solid team, they get beat up again. I'm curious if you think jumping off point and they start rolling here, or it's just they picked on a team that was down.
Now, this is the thing. I don't think there was a bigger advocate for the Giants preseason than me. I was rooting for these guys. I really liked the way they kind of built that team. I know they didn't have a lot of big weapons on there, but I thought that the type of team they were building was a really grindy, dirty type of team. And they dealt with a lot of injuries, and they weren't living up to the standards. I don't think that this is the tipping point where they start playing playoff caliber football. But, if you're a Giants fan, as bad as things have been, I think you take any win you can get and you kind of enjoy it while you can, because it seems like there's going to be few in between going forward, especially if they play like this against some of those tougher teams.
Yeah, definitely. So, all right, go to the Chargers-Eagles. I think we have to focus this on the Chargers. This is third week in a row. I have not think they have looked all that great. They did get the win. That puts them at 5-3, hovering around in. But once again, Herbert threw for 356, so he looked a little bit better. But, all those points and all those yards that were coming don't seem to be as clean. Now, I do think, Mike Williams has been banged up the last handful of weeks. I do think that has come into play, whereas you don't have that person to offset, Keenan Allen quite as much. But, their defense still looks bad. The Eagles couldn't fully take total advantage of it, but, Howard had 17 for 71, Hurts 10 for 60, Boston Scott 10 for 40. I think that's the main thing here. Unless this Chargers, defense improves by, leaps and bounds, they're just going to struggle beating really, really good teams overall, because they just can't stop anybody on the run. And you saw it the week before in the Patriots game. Basically, the Patriots just ran the ball down the throat. Chargers never got the ball. Chargers didn't score. Same thing happened the week before in the Baltimore game. And they can't even get this offense started. Now, you play a weak team like the Eagles. It's a close game, but they can sort of control that game. But I don't know if the Chargers, as hyped as we were early, are really an elite team. I'm starting to look at them more and more like the Saints, where they're a good team, they're an okay team, but they aren't a team that's going to be able to beat elite teams because they just don't have the defense, and they seem to make key mistakes on offense.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a real shame because you look at a lot of the guys that they have on this offense, and they have some very explosive weapons. As you mentioned, when Mike Williams was healthy, this offense was clicking on all cylinders. Now, even with that, all that being said, I didn't get to watch a lot of this game. I saw a few of the highlights, and then I went back and I looked at the stats, and it really perplexed me that
I had a large bet on it, and I was nervous pretty much the whole game.
I mean, Herbert only missed 6 pass attempts. Yeah. He threw for over 350 yards. He had no turnovers. He had no interceptions. Yeah. He threw 2 touchdowns. You flip the script to the Philadelphia side of the ball. Hurts didn't really look that great. The running attack wasn't super threatening. And somehow this was such a close matchup.
Yeah,
I don't understand what was going on.
They made a last-second drive to kick a field goal.
It just it boggles my mind that the defense can be that porous that when your offense is playing basically perfect football, it comes down to a field goal. It's crazy. As you mentioned, I think the Chargers are now officially at the level that they're not a great team, and they're also not a bad team. They're a good team that can beat you, but they're also beatable because they have such porous defense.
Yeah, you mentioned it. It'll be interesting to see if they can sort of find that momentum earlier in the season, but I just don't think they have the defense to quite do that this year. It'll also be interesting in division versus those Broncos and Raiders and Chiefs to see where they may. I think we were all hyped about that division, and then all of a sudden I think every team in that division is bad right now. So that's an interesting sort of flip. Speaking of teams we thought were going to dominate that division, and they got the win. It's probably the first defensive win they've gotten in quite a while, but it helps to have Jordan Love as the opposing team's quarterback instead of Aaron Rodgers. All those people who were hyped all week about Jordan Love taking over the job and them not needing Aaron Rodgers might want to check that. As much of a half-dick that Aaron Rodgers has been in the last week, he's still a very good quarterback, so you sort of need him. Jordan Love did not look ready to play and pretty much looked like he looked in college. Inconsistent, inaccurate, but very athletic and explosive arm. But I think the focus is the Chiefs. They appear to be getting worse every week instead of better. Mahomes, 20 of 37, 166. Granted, he did not throw a pick this week. It's just not good by the Chiefs. Now, that being said, they seem to have gotten a couple breaks here and are now 5-4. So what do you make of this game here?
Yeah, I mean, I really don't have much to give as far as analysis goes on this game. I will say that I expected the Chiefs to perform a lot better than they did. You're talking about a Packers defense that's not technically a complete lockdown defense. They're pretty good and they have their moments, but this team revolves around the offense and Aaron Rodgers. And I thought without Aaron Rodgers at the helm, this was a perfect opportunity for the Chiefs to get everything back in motion, right the ship, start going full steam. And they just do not look like the Chiefs. They do not look like them whatsoever. We know that defense is horrible already, but they could always fall back on that offense that could score basically, at will. And they can't get any offense going. They have no running attack. The wide receivers aren't getting the separation that they're used to getting because the defense doesn't feel threatened by a rushing attack. And Mahomes he doesn't look like Patrick Mahomes. I don't know what's going on. But I will say this. This is probably the best thing I could give anybody that's watching or listening to this. Aaron Rodgers, people who thought that the Packers could, roll with their backup quarterback going forward. Aaron Rodgers said a quote a few weeks ago that could possibly, be said again directly at those people. I own you. And that's what he does. They can't do anything without Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, that's right. Packers wise, just cross this out. No Aaron Rodgers. Not really a game to analyze at all. So you have anything on the Packers other than cross this off, wait till Rodgers gets back?
No, other than if he doesn't get back soon, I think they got to start being a little concerned with seeding possibilities, because if I'm a Packers fan or, a Packers player, I want the playoffs in the NFC to go through me.
Yeah.
Because Lambeau gets cold and nobody knows Lambeau the way Green Bay knows Lambeau. So I think you're starting to get a little concerned now.
Yeah. I think the thing is, I was talking about it 2 weeks ago, the Chiefs not making the playoffs. If Aaron Rodgers plays in this game, I think the Packers win easy from what we've seen from the Chiefs offense. So, that puts them at 8-1, and they're just rolling to that, 1 seed, especially with that division with Detroit, Chicago, and Minnesota.
Sorry to cut you off,
No,
but I do.
good.
It just, it's like you said, the Chiefs defense is super, super, super porous, and the backup quarterback couldn't muster any points against them. So if you don't have Aaron Rodgers under center, you're looking at a few more losses, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. All right. We'll go to Coach Genius, who managed to play a team that did not have Kyler Murray, did not have DeAndre Hopkins. A.J. Green did not have a catch in the game. George Kittle was back, and guess what? They were thoroughly trounced. Do we have any excuses more for why Kyle Shanahan is a great coach, other than he's not a great coach? Good win by the Cardinals. Wonderful that Colt McCoy is still in the league. I don't know what to say of this game other than the Niners suck. They somehow might be worse than the Seahawks, who haven't had their quarterback for 7-8 weeks. So what do you make of the Niners here? I don't think you can gauge anything off the Cardinals other than they got a win that they probably shouldn't have with the injuries that they did. They're now 8-1. They're the ones pushing for that 1 seed out in the NFC. So you can touch on the Cardinals a little bit, but much like the Green Bay, without Hopkins and Murray, this is a cross-off game, except it's a cross-off game that they somehow managed to win. I think the talking point here is the Niners.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think, first off, you give kudos to the Arizona Cardinals and that organization. They did a great job at putting together a game plan to win a game when your 2 most potent offensive weapons were out of the game. As you mentioned, Colt McCoy came out and he looked like the second coming of Peyton Manning. He had a really efficient day. As you mentioned, A.J. Green did not catch anything, and somehow they still won the game. I think this says more about the 49ers, as you said, than it does about the Cardinals. The Cardinals are a good team. I think that's been stated. Do I think that they're slightly overrated? Yeah, I do. I don't think that they're quite ready for the limelight, but that's not what we're going to talk about here. We're going to talk about the 49ers, and it's the recipe for success. The recipe for a win was basically written for them. It was set up. You had Kittle back. You had Garoppolo basically starting to get healthy, starting to get, a little rapport going with his wide receivers. And you're going up against a hobbled up division rival, division leader, and you can't pull off the win. I don't know, man. I think that the Niners are a bad team, but I do have to say, Russell Wilson has not been out 7 or 8 weeks, but he has been cleared to return. So something else for the Niners to be concerned about.
Yeah. It's bordering on, it's almost time to file fire Shanahan. Now, I think he signed a $400 billion deal where he has full control of the organization. So I don't even know if you can fire yourself.
He's a genius.
Yes, I know. He's a genius who can't beat a Cardinals team with Colt McCoy and James Conner leading the line here. So I don't know what you do with this 49ers team. It's one good season mixed in with 4 bad ones. And you can, use the injury excuse, but they were pretty much healthy here. For some reason, they decided to go against what they do so well in running the ball. They threw 40 times. Elijah Mitchell had 8 carries. JaMychal Hasty had 1 carry, and no other running back touched the ball. So I just don't know what this 49ers team is. And it's to the point where now it's just time to throw Trey Lance in there and see if you can get him reps, because I don't think this season's salvageable for them. You could talk me into the Seahawks being salvageable with Russell Wilson coming back, but if you can't beat this Cardinals team without Murray, without Hopkins, basically without Green, and it's James Conner and Colt McCoy basically dominating you. This wasn't even a close game. It's time to sort of pack things in and retool here.
Yeah, definitely a lot worse, the 49ers, than I anticipated they would be.
All right. Speaking of pack things in and retool, the Los Angeles Rams.
You just had to.
I just had to. I don't think it's quite time to pack things in and retool for the Rams, but in 2 years, they might be retooling for the next 20, because I don't know if they have a draft pick for the next 20 years after this. But tough game versus the Titans. You knew the Titans were going to at least come out aggressive that first game after Derrick Henry. We'll see if they can keep that up. That being said, their offense wasn't all that spectacular. Matthew Stafford pretty much gifted them about 21 points there to start the game. And I thought the Rams' offensive game plan to start the first half was atrocious. It didn't get much better in the second half. But I'm curious your thoughts on this game overall.
Yeah, I mean, I said it throughout the week. I thought that this was going to be a tough matchup for the Rams, even without Henry. Now, let alone if Henry was playing, I probably would have came out and said, even as a Ram fan, that they were going to lose that game just because of the type of style of offense that the Titans like to run. And I thought they would stick to a similar type of structure, but probably alter it a little bit now that they didn't have their star running back. But as you mentioned, the Titans offense really wasn't great. They played good football, but it wasn't great. A lot of this was basically the Rams shooting themselves early in the foot early on, and then they had to get away from running the ball because they were down basically. So you have to make some sort of comeback. The decision to kick field goals as opposed to go for touchdowns, even on 4th down in certain situations, kind of made me scratch my head a little bit. You would think Sean McVay, a guy who's, always tagged as an offensive guru, he would, try to use at least analytics a little bit, but that didn't seem to be the situation here. Overall, I just think this was a bad game for the Rams during upset week, and you got to give kudos to the Titans. They've been playing a lot better over the last couple of weeks. I don't think they can keep up, especially with Henry being out, but hey, they got AD now, so all day, maybe he can carry him.
Yeah, except he barely got as many snaps as Deontay Foreman, so everybody might want to scale that one back a little bit. But, I'm not going to hammer McVay as, boy genius 2 here. He at least has a winning record where Kyle Shanahan has a losing record. But I did just, he kept dropping back. The line couldn't hold up. And then, he finally decided stubbornly to make that change in the second half. He didn't seem to want to make that change in the first half. And really, that's probably what cost him the game, because that's where all the Titans' points, came from. That and the, I'm not blaming the refs for games, but there was the shady Aaron Donald, roughing the passer play
albeit
on the 3rd down.
Albeit that was...
Granted, the Rams weren't exactly blowing anyone away. They kept deciding to kick field goals instead of go for touchdowns on 4th and shorts. But, we'll get into that decision-making too. But, the Titans now at 7-2. with Buffalo losing, the Ravens sort of hot and cold, and they're in that, weak division. Can they maintain and keep this record? It's going to be interesting. I don't know if Derrick Henry's coming back. If Henry's, not back, or if he's back and not healthy, they are, winning playoff games. So, that's that. But I do think if they can get that bye and maintain that 1 seed, it would be very important, where maybe you get an okay Henry, as opposed to having to play that first round matchup and rushing Henry back where he's just, able to stand. But I'm an NBA guy, and that Jones fracture is just, it's murder, because it's basically where you plant and lean and cut off of. And with that much body weight and force, especially with Derrick Henry, it's not like he's one of these little small guys. He's built more like an NBA player. And the second you start to do that, it sort of re-injures the foot, and it gets weaker and weaker. There are tons of guys in the NBA where they get this injury and they're just never the same, because each time they come back, it just causes re-injury. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they play that with Derrick Henry, and if they can maintain this 7-2 record and try to steal that, bye week, which I think would be really, really important for them.
Yeah, just a couple of things before we move on from this game. To all of the Tennessee Titan fans that just keep hammering me every time they see me, I will say congratulations. It was a really good win for you guys.
It's week
and
9.
also to those who are basically crowning them as the Super Bowl champions already after a couple of good wins. I will say the Rams didn't win their division last season, yet they still got a lot further in the playoffs. So remember that.
Yeah. Also, if we remember this time last year in week 9, which now there's an extra game, so we're just basically at the halfway point. The Steelers were 9-0. So, we probably want to hold off before crowning Super Bowl champs. I believe the Tampa Bay Bucks were 5-4 at this point. So, let's scale back. We have about 8 more weeks to go of the season. So there's no champion for being the best team in week 9. So let's see how this thing plays out with still pretty much half a season to go before we
Although if there was an award for week 9, they would definitely get it. So, kudos to them.
All right. The aforementioned Steelers played on Monday Night Football, and this was sort of a Steelers victory. Got up, Bears got back, drove down, kick a last-second field goal. I think the Steelers sort of go in the list of Saints, Chargers. They're okay, but I don't think this team is good enough to really contend. What'd you make of this game? Bears now 3-6. I think the Bears probably out of the playoff picture, whereas we sort of still think Minnesota has a chance to get hot. I don't think this Bears team has a chance to get hot enough to really contend for a playoff spot here. But let's go Steelers first.
Steelers first. I mean, they're a good enough team to win games. They found a pretty good balance compared to last season. Now, they do have a couple of issues, which is, they're basically their weapons out on the outside, their wide receivers have been kind of banged up in and out all season long, which has really hurt the progression of that team on offense. Defensively, they're not as stout as they were last season, but they're still really good defense that they could play with just about anybody on any given Sunday. So they've got all that going for them, but I just don't think that this Steelers team as it currently sits can contend long-term in the playoffs. I think they can get in there, especially if they keep playing the way they're playing, but it's hard for me to see them winning a lot of games, especially the way this one kind of panned out, especially late in that game. You really got to learn how to close teams out, and that a lot of times begins with a good rushing attack, which they're supposed to have. They just don't seem to utilize when they need to.
Yeah, definitely so. I do think the Steelers are probably going to be a playoff team here. But we mentioned it just a second ago. They were 9-0. They actually got to 13-0 before they really started to tank. I don't know if they'll start to tank, but Bengals solid team, Browns solid team, Baltimore one of the best teams in the league. So at 5-3. I still don't totally trust this team playing against good teams. So it might be, hot and cold all season long. We'll see if they can slide it. I do think they'll get into that playoff, but I don't factor them as a team that would be dangerous in the playoff. I think they get in there. We watch them play. They get beat up, pretty easy by one of those top teams in those first weeks. Bears-wise, anything on them other than well, hopefully the coach and GM are gone and we retool this next year and we have fun on our draft show.
Yeah, I think that's basically their main focus right now is that and the development of their young quarterback. Maybe they can figure out whether there's a rapport between him and the wide receiver, which is probably going to be due to get paid a lot of money soon. And if there is no rapport there, then maybe it's time to start using some of those assets to build an even better team going forward. But as it sits right now, I think it's time to focus on developing.
Well, I think if Allen Robinson gets franchised again by the team, he might go left eye and burn down the facility. I think he's looking as much as he can to get out of that situation. All right, so that's our recap of the week. Let's get into our best and worst of the week. Let's start off with best on the offensive side of things. Where are you going here?
For best of the week on offense, I am actually going to go with Connor, running back out of Arizona. 96 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, 5 catches, 77 yards, and a touchdown. The guy was a Swiss Army knife for that team that was lacking weapons, both quarterback and wide receiver. Going up against a divisional rival that was healthy and was getting their star players back. He seemed to get it done by himself, so player of the week, Connor.
Yeah, I'm going two-way here. I'm going Colt McCoy and James Conner as our offensive players of the week. Really impressive what Colt McCoy did. Really impressive what James Conner did to go in there and beat the 49ers. So we're going with McCoy and Conner. Nice win there. Keep the Cardinals at 8-1 and ahead of the Green Bay Packers, who now are behind them by a game, even though they had the tiebreaker over them. You see how much that hurt the Packers with Aaron Rodgers being out there. We'll see how this closes, but, that might be a big game that they probably had marked down as a loss and now becomes a win. So big game from McCoy and Conner. Where are you going on the defensive side of things?
For the defense side of the ball, I'm actually going to go with Josh Allen. Not that Josh Allen. Josh Allen that faced against that Josh Allen.
UK pride, baby.
he had a really good game.
Kentucky pride.
I think all day long, the whole week, he was probably listening to sports media talk about Josh Allen's going to be great. Josh Allen's going to do this. Josh Allen's going to look amazing this Sunday. And he thought they were talking about him. So he went out and he put up a really good game. He ended up with 8 tackles, 1 sack, 1 interception, and he also was involved in that fumble there with Josh Allen. So I think he was deserving. Probably doesn't get a lot of praise. Nobody on the team gets a lot of praise on a weekly basis. So I thought he was deserving. So Josh Allen, Defensive Player of the Week.
Well, we're on the same wavelength here because I went Josh Allen and that Jaguar defense overall. I thought they'd been getting a little bit better. They do have some playmakers on there. We'll ignore that 42-0 shellacking versus the Seattle Seahawks the week before. I still want half my money back because of this defensive performance here. But yeah, Josh Allen, really good. Really like him off the edge there. It's very Von Miller like in his younger days. So nice play by the Jags. Defense, Josh Allen. All right, where are we going coach-wise here?
For coach, I'm actually going to go with the guy who has gotten some love and some hate throughout the season, and that's the Arizona coach, Cliff Kingsbury. He won without his star quarterback, his star wide receiver, and his second best wide receiver really impacting the game. He did it, as you mentioned, with your player of the week, Colt McCoy, and your co-player of the week in Connor. They both had an outstanding game against a divisional rival who, as I mentioned earlier, was healthy now and was supposed to win that game. So I think that he's got to get some credit here, put together a good game plan, something that wasn't going to really rattle the journeyman quarterback that we know Colt McCoy to be. And he pulled off a win. So in a game that a lot of people probably thought they were going to lose, they actually gained the game in that division, and they're one step closer to getting home field advantage. So Kingsbury, coach of the week.
Yeah. Well, this is exciting and fun. I went Kingsbury as well. We've given him a lot of stick over the past couple of years, but I think he's gotten coach of the week a couple times this year. And once again, to win that game versus the 49ers, really, really impressive win overall. That line moved from Arizona 2.5 to San Francisco 5.5, and they just dominated that game. Little shout out to Vic Fangio and the Broncos too for having them ready even after they looked like they were sort of packing things in for the season. And a little shout out to Mike Vrabel as well, who had a really good game plan, got everybody ready for that Rams game. All right, let's switch to the worst of the week. Where are you going on the worst side of the offense here?
Listen, on offense, there's definitely a lot of candidates, especially when you look at the statistics for this past week of games. But I'm going to go with somebody who hurt me, hurt my heart, hurt my soul and my confidence. And I'm going with you, Matthew Stafford. You threw 2 costly interceptions. One that was a pick six that was basically a replay of the mistake the previous week that Tennessee caused in the end zone. And it just completely boggled me at the type of offense that they put, especially with all the praise they've been getting about how efficient that offense has been. Even though Cooper Kupp had a good game, we didn't see the type of Cooper Kupp numbers that we've been seeing so far this season. Even though I do want to give him a shout out, he broke 1,000 yards through 9 weeks of play so far. So shout out to him, but Matthew Stafford, worst of the week, and it's more personal than anything.
Yeah, we are. This is going to look like we didn't do our work here as we're repeating the same people. You could go over a lot, but, you cross a lot of these games off. I could probably signal everybody in that Texans-Dolphins, game out. Pretty much everybody in that Packers-Chiefs game. But, the important game of the week was Titans and Rams, and Stafford, laid an egg. And it's another egg.
Prime time.
Yeah, this is the second time, he's laid an egg in a big game. That Cardinals game, I did not think he played all that well. Once again, he did not play all that well. We can hear the announcers talk about the Sean McVay Stafford connection, their trips to Cabo, and how on, wave they are. But what do you think this team's record would be if Jared Goff was the quarterback right now? I don't think it would be much different than 7-2. So, what are you really getting from Matthew Stafford? Once again, that play in the end zone, that's a Jared Goff play. Don't take the sack. Don't get the safety floated up in the middle of the field. You give the other team a touchdown. Momentum. You're playing from behind the whole game. It's just, if they want to go to the Super Bowl, which basically they have sold their soul to try to get to the Super Bowl this year in LA and forsaken pretty much your future for the possibly next 20 years of your life as you watch the team not have any draft picks. They have to play better, and Matthew Stafford has to play better because now you're teetering. You're a couple wins off from having to go on the road in playoff games, possibly in cold weather places, and you're just going to make things hard on yourself. So bad game by Matthew Stafford. Where are you going on the defensive side of things?
Now, for defense, there's so many different teams that I was thinking about taking. I thought about the Bills for a second, but I'm like, no, the Bills didn't play horrible defense. I thought about the Rams going up against a Derrick Henry-less Titans team, and I was like, defense didn't play that bad either.
No.
So I finally came upon one, and I'm going with the Cowboys, okay? We've praised them, and now it's time to hold them accountable, all right? So they gave up almost 200 yards on the ground and almost 250 yards through the air. And this is a team that defensively has been causing a ruckus. They've been making noise just about everywhere, causing turnovers here, causing turnovers there. So I think that as much as we praised them so far this season, we got to hold them accountable. they put up a bad performance. So worst of the week, Cowboys defense.
Yeah. I have Sam Darnold singled out defensively as the worst player for the Carolina Panthers because the only reason any other team scores is because Sam Darnold hands the ball to him in bad positions. But really, I'm going Niners here. This defense is supposed to be able to carry them, and to get lit up by Colt McCoy and James Conner, basically a hand-me-down backup quarterback who's been all over the place, and James Conner, who's, he's technically not even the starting running back on the team. He's the backup running back to Chase Edmonds. So, this Niners defense, which has been much ballyhooed, once again, really, really poor. All right, worst of the week on the coaching side of things.
For worst of the week on coaching, I'm actually going to go with 49ers head coach Kyle Shanahan. And simply put, as you mentioned, as we talked about a few times so far this show, you were going up against a team without Murray, without Hopkins, in a game where Green wasn't going to be an issue. And not just that, the starting running back got banged up. And that team lost their best, threat on defense earlier on this season. So you're talking about a team that lost so many weapons for this particular matchup. You're getting all your guys back. Divisional rival, you want to, make a run. You want to try to claw yourself back into this playoff race, conversation. And this is the type of performance you put out. You don't get your team completely prepared for this. I feel like as much as we praise this team as having a lot of potential, we have to also call them out when they choke the way they did. And the 49ers did, and it starts at the top. So Shanahan, worst of the week.
Yeah, he's just my commemorative pick every week until the 49ers recognize that he's a bad football coach and fire him. I'm going to spread the wealth here. Mike McCarthy probably should be on the commemorative list as well. But they've managed to win games, so I probably can't put him there, but they laid a big egg with Denver. I think Sean McVay's game plan probably deserves a little bit of a hit here in the worst coach. And then just basically all coaching in the Texans-Dolphins game. That was just terrible to watch. So universally, bad coaching in the NFL. Probably Matt LaFleur deserves a little bit of a whammy here too. He gets labeled with his offensive genius, and once again, his offensive genius is Aaron Rodgers. So, lot of.
It's easy to look smart when you have a guy like that.
Yes, I know. I think there's a lot of bad coaching going on overall in the league. But that does it for our review. We'll be back on Friday with our pick show. We got college basketball starting up. Be on the lookout for our preview show with that with Dynamite David. We got our college football pick show coming up on Thursday, and Winning Daily. College basketball's back. We'll be on track to get into that. Where can we find you, Achilles?
Well, as always, you can find me on Twitter at TD Achilles.
All right, that's our show, and we're out.